Heyo, guess what? Weird Wednesday. Today I had a throbbing pain headache because they were doing construction work, road work outside my house. Isn't that lovely? Isn't that great? Isn't that dandy? So this is a little segment I like to call Weird Wednesday, where I react to weird paranormal bullshit like science fiction documentaries, alien documentaries, stuff about cryptids, spooky ghosts, and horrors and whatnot. I'm just gonna be upfront. I'm gonna be Johnny Come Honest. I'm gonna be Apple Honest Man. I'm gonna be Frankie Honest with you. I don't believe in the supernatural. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in spirits. Don't believe in that bullshit. But I do think aliens are real, and I do find like aliens and alien conspiracies to be more of a fascinating look at modern, I guess you could say, myth making. I'm going to pause and I'm going to skip all the ads on this person's ads. Let's see who this is by so I can thank them. Who is this by? Mr. Mythos. Thank you, Mr. Mythos. I'll be reacting to your thing. I will have to say hello and thank you in the comments. So yeah, this is called. Let me see this. What is this again? Just so I can thank the person right. Ultraterrestrials Conspiracy Theories by Mr. Mythos. If I don't get all of this through today, because, like I said, I had one hell of a fucking headache. I had one hell of a headache. I had just the worst kind of headache. Yeah.
By Manta Sleep.
It's brought to you by Mantis
Hey,
Slip.
fellow seekers, I'm Mr. Mythos.
Okay,
In the
hello
year
there, Mr.
1970, the
Beardy.
investigative journalist John Keel presented a hypothesis that he knew would come off as unhinged, laughable, and downright offensive to many. As a ufologist,
John
someone who
Keel.
investigates unidentified flying objects and their associated phenomena
Let
for
me
a
let me
living.
fix this. It's got to look better on my end. Yeah, that looks less like shit. This is the joys of working with YouTube videos. The joys of working with YouTube videos. I want it to look less like shit. Okay. Yeah, I should have just downloaded that, then used the good old cone player. But the Space Brothers decided, no, Ted, you're not going to use the cone player today. No, sir. We are the Space Brothers. Yes, this guy looks. The more I look at it, this guy, he looks more like the classic G.I. Joe. I'm
Keel
sorry.
was widely respected for his intellect and grounded skepticism,
I'm,
and up
I'm
to
going
that
to
point,
return.
he'd
I'm going to
spent.
restart this so that I get the premise more before I start becoming
This
Johnny Come
investigation is
Chatter.
sponsored by Manta Sleep.
Chatterman.
Hey,
Harold
fellow
Chatterman.
seekers, I'm Mr. Mythos. In the year 1970, the investigative journalist John Keel presented a hypothesis that he knew would come off as unhinged, laughable, and downright offensive to many. As a ufologist, someone who investigates unidentified flying objects and their associated phenomena for a living, Keel was widely respected for his intellect and grounded skepticism, and up to that point, he'd spent his career working to
Okay.
validate the extraterrestrial
Hey,
hypothesis. The
we're watching Ultraterrestrials by Mr. Mythos. I just began. I'm gonna say the warning. I'm gonna start the video. Does everything look good on your end, or do you want me to fiddle with the video a little bit more?
this investigation is sponsored by
I'm
Manta
going
Sleep.
to I'm gonna be
Hey,
honest.
fellow
I don't believe in
seekers, I'm
ghosts.
Mr.
Don't believe in the
Mythos. In the
supernatural.
year 1970, the investigative journalist
You
John
know,
Keel presented a hypothesis that he knew would come off as unhinged, laughable, and downright offensive to many. As a
I'm gonna
ufologist,
react.
someone who investigates
Okay, John
unidentified
Keel.
flying
Fair
objects and their
enough.
associated phenomena for a living, Keel was widely respected for his intellect and grounded skepticism, and up to that point, he'd
I
spent
like
his
his
career
flat
working to
cap.
validate the
It reminds me of my
extraterrestrial
grandpa.
hypothesis, the prevailing argument that UFOs and their pilots are not from planet Earth. But things changed for Keel. As he wrote, quote, I abandoned the extraterrestrial hypothesis in 1967 when my own field investigations disclosed an astonishing overlap between psychic phenomena and
Okay,
UFOs.
you
These objects
psychics.
and apparitions do not necessarily originate on another planet.
Ah,
Quote,
I see.
John Keel felt that the evidence was strong enough that it was worth challenging the life
I'm
work of his colleagues in the field,
I'm going
as
to
well
need
as
the
the
evidence, Mr.
religious
Keel.
beliefs and spiritual experiences of his closest friends.
I'm going to need the
He
evidence,
presented
Mr.
the
Keel.
ultraterrestrial hypothesis, a unified catch-all explanation for paranormal phenomena. If you don't
Oh
believe
boy,
in
AI art.
UFOs, let alone magic, ghosts, or the Loch Ness Monster,
Oh boy,
this
AI
may sound
art.
like a real stretch, but hear me out. The hypothesis
Why
argues
couldn't
that everything supernatural and all things paranormal.
why couldn't we get shitty gifs, like shitty gifs of like aliens doing a funny little dance like we did back in the 90s? That's what I
From
miss about
UFO
90s
sightings,
conspiracy
alien
websites. They had
abductions, and
funny little
cryptid
alien
encounters,
gifs.
to poltergeist activity, fairy kidnappings, demonic possession,
Fairies.
and even angelic visitations. All of these anomalies and more stem from the same source, ultraterrestrials. Let's break it down.
Okay, that's AI
Terrestrials
art.
means inhabitants of this Earth,
Yep.
but ultra implies that these beings are far beyond the nature and
Ultra
capabilities of humans or any other terrestrial
combo.
species we know of, different to the furthest possible degree in almost every way. So not only are we not alone in this universe, but we're actually sharing this planet with a species we can't comprehend or compete with. According to the hypothesis,
I
ultraterrestrials
mean,
can
with
materialize and
with the way
dematerialize
the
themselves
world
in
is
multiple
right
reality
now, I
at
feel
once.
like any higher
Worse
being
yet,
would have put a
these
stop
groups
to
have
it
been
by
messing with
now.
humanity
And
since
that is as
ancient
political as
times and
I'm going to get
continue
right
to this
now.
very day.
That is as
As for
political
what
as
these
I'm going to
beings
get.
actually
If
are,
I was a
they
higher
pair well with
being,
us
I'd be
comparatively
putting a
few
stop to, the
humans.
genocides and
Further,
the
the
wars and the
evidence and
death and, the
implications only get
suffering.
stranger from here.
I'd be putting an end
We're
to those
talking about a
shenanigans pretty
secret and
soon
very
if I
alien
was one of the Space
civilization living
Brothers.
on this planet. So let's
How
try
was
to
your
get to
day?
know
I'm
our
sorry
neighbors. But before
if
we
I'm being...
transcend into the ultra-terrestrial realm, there's a more down-to-earth mystery I've spent most of my life solving. How to get a good night's sleep.
Okay,
Insomnia's
skip.
aliens might actually be extra-dimensional or interdimensional beings. This
Okay,
idea
fifth
is
dimension.
nowhere near as provocative and controversial
We
as
are
the
going to
ultra-terrestrial
ascend
hypothesis,
to
though.
the fifth
But the
dimension.
two are directly
Living in the
related.
fifth dimension is
So
tough.
much so that when you read into what many of the major proponents of the interdimensional UFO hypothesis actually talk about, you might realize that their ideas and arguments aren't so open-ended. They're
Okay.
specifically describing ultra-terrestrials, long before John Keel would give them that name. Dr. J. Allen Hynek is...
Okay, I'm gonna just stop here for a second. I want you to be honest with me. I'm sorry if I come off as an asshole here. But does the term ultra terrestrial sound like something from a really bad comic book?
arguably the most famous
Like, we're not
ufologist
dealing
in
with
history,
regular
as the
terrestrials, sir.
scientific
We're dealing
advisor
with
of the
dun dun
three
dun
UFO
ultra
studies conducted by the U.S.
terrestrials.
Air Force in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, the most important being Project Blue Book. Originally, the Air
Good
Force
old
hired
Project
Hynek to
Blue
debunk
Book.
the UFO phenomenon, and Hynek himself was a complete skeptic.
Wasn't there a
After 15 years of
wasn't
work,
there a
Dr.
conspiracy
Hynek
theory
became a
that Blue
believer.
Book was just a smoke
This
screen
wasn't the
to
last time he'd
hide the
undergo a
real
dramatic
truth
shift
that the
in
government
opinion,
knew
though.
about aliens?
About a
I
decade
remember
later,
hearing
he
and
began to
reading
speak
about that.
openly about an inexplicable yet undeniable pattern that continuously showed up
Ah, I
across.
see. Yes, it does some. Yeah, but if I remember correctly, I read or
His
heard from
research.
like really
A
early back
staggering
in the
number
day
of
that Blue
credible
Book
reports of UFO sightings, close encounters,
like a
and alien abductions were also accompanied by
was like a
descriptions
like
of
a false
paranormal and
flag
psychic
to
phenomena
hide the
that
truth or
wouldn't
something
normally
like
be
that about
thought of
aliens
as
or the
related to
reptile men
UFOs
or
at all.
something, if I remember correctly,
Why was it that so many people reported
or the
poltergeist
alien
activity in
reptile
their
men,
home, ghosts materializing and
the
walking through
True-odont man,
walls,
if you
and
will?
telepathic communication with spirits immediately before or after a close proximity encounter with a UFO? Today, this connection is referred to as high strangeness. In 1977, Dr. Hynek brought this issue up with the first International UFO Congress. Quote, "Do we have two aspects of one phenomenon or two different sets of phenomena? I do believe that the UFO phenomenon as a whole is real, but we must ask whether the diversity of observed UFOs all spring from the same basic source, as do weather phenomena, which all originate in the atmosphere. I hold it entirely possible that a technology exists which encompasses both the physical and the psychic, the material and the mental. End quote. Despite his influence, it wasn't J. Allen Hynek who led John Keel to his ultra-terrestrial revelation.
Okay.
The one who really opened up the rabbit hole was actually Hynek's protege, the Internet and Artificial Intelligence pioneer, Dr. Jacques Vallée. In 1963, Dr. Vallée was
That guy
hired
looks
as a
like he would
systems
front
analyst
a
at
70s
Northwestern
band and
University,
take all the
where
drugs
J. Allen
forever.
Hynek was the chair of the astronomy department. Hynek had been looking
I
for
bet
help
John
with
Vallée
conducting
made some sick
non-university
concept
scientific
albums
research
about
into
the
UFOs. And
ultra-terrestrials
Vallée,
back
a
in the
gifted
70s.
astronomer and a huge fan of science fiction, was very interested. They'd spend the next several years working together, and Hynek became Vallée's mentor. Over the years, the two scientists managed to compile an enormous digital database of UFO.
I want to see what that word was. Unpalatable pancakes? Huh? What? Quick?
And alien encounters that they deemed credible. Dr. Hynek pulled several hundred reports from the files of Project Blue Book, while Dr. Vallée collected several thousand historic and folkloric records by hand across Europe. Vallée was a pioneer for more than just the early internet and AI, but also the field of ufology. Academic research into the UFO phenomenon today requires the use of computers for data processing, statistical analysis, and simulations. Vallée was one of the very first to do this, and this method allowed him to identify some seriously bizarre patterns, ones that caused Vallée's rational brain to short-circuit. For example, a staggering number of close contact and abduction reports describe the appearance and behaviors of alien beings in a way that literally sounds like a low-budget parody movie. Project Blue Book investigated one such case that occurred on April 18, 1961, in the remote outskirts of Eagle River, Wisconsin. A 60-year-old chicken farmer named Joe Simonton was inside a small house where he lived alone. It was a quiet morning.
Okay, this is probably off topic, I'm sorry, but which was the name of the guy who claimed he had sex with an alien? Do you know who I'm talking about? Right? You know who I'm talking about? It was this guy who said, oh yeah, I fucked an alien, and then there was this weird mantis guy just watching me. His name eludes me.
Stepping into his yard, Joe Simonton faced a silvery saucer-shaped object, brighter than chrome, which appeared to be hovering close to the ground without actually
Not a fan of this
touching it.
AI art, that's for
The
sure.
object was about 12 feet high and 30 feet in diameter. A hatch opened about 5 feet from the ground, and Simonton saw 3 men inside the machine. One of them was dressed in a black two-piece suit. The occupants were about 5 feet in height. Smooth-shaven, they appeared to resemble Italians. They had dark hair and skin, and wore outfits with turtleneck tops and knit helmets. One of the men held up a jug, apparently made of the same material as a saucer. His motions to Joe Simonton seemed to indicate that he needed water. Simonton took the jug, went inside the house, and filled it. As he returned, he saw that one of the men inside the saucer was frying food on a flameless grill of some sort. The entire ship was black, the color of wrought iron.
I wonder what the alien fried food tastes like now.
Slow whining sound.
Now I'm just wondering what alien hyper fifth dimensional being food tastes like. I'm being an asshole now, aren't I? I'm sorry.
One of the men, who was also dressed in black, but with a narrow red trim along the trousers, handed him 3 cookies, pancakes, about 3 inches in diameter and perforated with small holes. Simonton ate one of them and thought it tasted like cardboard. The whole affair lasted about 5 minutes. Finally, the man closest to the witness attached a kind of belt to the hook in his clothing and closed the hatch in such a way that Simonton could scarcely detect its outline. Then the object rose about 20 feet from the ground before taking off straight south, causing a blast of air that bowed some nearby pine trees. Sheriff Schroeder affirmed that the witness obviously believed the truth of what he was saying and talked very sensibly about the incident. End quote. Thankfully, Simonton neither threw away nor finished the breakfast he'd been given. He immediately contacted the local police and provided a statement, after which they confiscated the 2 remaining pancakes as evidence. Here's a picture they took of Joe Simonton holding one of the cakes in his hand. The case was deemed serious enough to escalate to federal authorities, and the U.S. Air Force was called in. It wasn't.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you a question, and yet again, you may think I'm an asshole, but is it me or does that fifth dimensional pancake look like a piece of coral, right? Or like a pumice rock or a pumice rock with all the holes in it, right? I'm not the only one who sees that. I'm not the only one who sees that that looks like pumice or
They took
rock
of
or
Joe
like
Simonton
a
holding one
piece
of the
of
cakes in
coral
his
or
hand.
something.
The case was deemed serious
It
enough
might
to
just be the
escalate to
quality of the
federal
photo.
authorities.
See, right? That looks like coral there. Also, oh man, it looks like he has no eyes here. It does look burnt.
And the U.S. Air Force
Frickin'
was called in.
fifth dimensional
It wasn't
people and
long
their
before
burnt
2 key members of Project Blue Book,
pancakes.
Dr. J. Allen Hynek and Major Robert Friend, arrived at
You know
Simonton's
what?
farm.
I trust a man
After an
named
extensive
Friend.
interview with
I
the
trust a
farmer,
man named
Dr. Hynek
Major
wrote in his
Friend with my
notes,
life.
quote, "There is no
If
question
if
that
someone came
Mr.
up to me and said,
Simonton
"Hello,
felt
my
he
name
was
is Major
contacted
Friend,"
with
I
an
trust
ordeal
them for the rest of my
experience." End
days.
quote. The Air
I
Force
mean, they're
requested the
literally a
Food and
major
Drug
friend.
Laboratory of the U.S.
How
Department
else?
of
How
Health
could they be
perform a
evil?
complete analysis on
How
what
could they
appeared
be
to be
evil?
nothing more than innocent pancakes. And after several days of tests, the lab returned with conclusive results. Quote, "The cake was composed of hydrogenated fat, starch, buckwheat hulls, soybean hulls, wheat bran. Bacteria and radiation readings were normal for this material. Chemical, infrared, and other destructive type tests were run on this material. The Food and Drug Laboratory of the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare concluded that the material was an ordinary pancake of terrestrial origin." End quote. So the cakes were not a lie. These were normal pancakes in almost every way, except for 2 details. Dr. Valet noted that the recipe lacked one major ingredient, sodium chloride, or table salt, and perhaps that's why Joe Simonton thought they tasted like cardboard. But while unsalted food is certainly alien in American culture, the same might be said about buckwheat pancakes. As a pseudograin unrelated to wheat, buckwheat is hardly ever eaten or grown in the US. However, it's a staple ingredient across Asia and Europe. These are important details, indeed. As I mentioned, Valet had collected several thousand European records to cross-compare with Hynek's stash from Project Blue Book.
So the
Prior to this new
ultra-terrestrial
project,
people
Valet had
don't like
become
their
intensely
pancakes salted.
fascinated with the ancient origin of the UFO phenomenon, due to his data suggesting strong links with older,
Is what you're
well-established
telling me.
descriptions of paranormal and supernatural phenomena. Valet decided to travel back to his home country of France to dig up cultural records. He contacted
Okay.
booksellers all around Paris, eventually accumulating an impressive library of centuries old records and esoteric writings. When he returned to the United States, Valet moved to phase 2 of his plan, to compare what he found with the modern accounts of Project Blue Book. It was 1969, and this early computer user booted up his machine to process the data and run his analyses. Despite their origins separated by thousands of miles, hundreds of years, cultures, language barriers, and literary nature, the statistical analysis revealed connections.
Fascinating.
Dr. Valet found that similar accounts of alien visitors cooking buckwheat pancakes for humans had been recorded by the Bretons, a Celtic ethnic group living in Brittany, France's northern peninsula. Breton folklore prior to the Industrial Revolution not only contained countless references to buckwheat, their staple crop, but it continuously spoke of visitations and interactions the Bretons had with
Gnomes,
fairy-like entities
gnomes and fairies.
Notably, the Fions were known to cook buckwheat pancakes for humans, especially as a means of holding up their end of a deal. Here's just one example. Quote, "Once upon a time, a black cow belonging to little cave-dwelling Fions ruined the buckwheat field of a poor woman who bitterly complained about the damage. The Fions made a deal with her. They would see to it that she would never run out of buckwheat cakes, provided she kept her mouth shut. And indeed, she and her family discovered that their supply
This just
of
sounds
cake
like a
was
myth, a really
inexhaustible.
weird, lame myth.
Alas,
No offense,
one day
I'm
the woman
sorry.
gave some of the cake to a man who should not have been entrusted with the secret of its magical origin. and the family had to go back to the ordinary way of making buckwheat cakes. End quote. In case you're wondering, buckwheat cakes are indeed pancakes, and Breton lore isn't the only
Which
folk
is funny
source that
because I
links
just had
fairies with
waffles
this
for dinner.
light and delicate food,
So,
fitting
I
for their
can't
ethereal
complain
nature.
about eating
Another
pancakes
good
for dinner.
example would be The Fairies, a famous Irish poem written by William Allingham in 1883. And note that this poem also clearly describes the European belief in fairy kidnappings, perhaps a pre-modern description of a UFO abduction.
I've heard
Quote,
people say that and people
"Little
compare
men,
that.
we folk, good folk. They live on crispy pancakes, going up with music on cold starry nights to sup with the queen of the gay northern lights. They stole little Bridget for 7 years long. When she came down again, her friends were all gone. They took her lightly back between night and morrow. They have kept her ever since." End quote. In traditional Celtic fairy legends, the details of fairy food and diet are extremely important. It's easy to find references to the idea that fairies grow their own grains, that they love to bake and cook, and that they often gift humans these light, bready goods in exchange for helping them. Moreover, it's been believed throughout history that fairies can't stomach salt at all and won't cook with it or eat food that contains it. And to go full circle, fairies are thought to only drink pure water, which is, of course, what Joe Simonton filled up a jug with on request from his short-statured alien visitors. Here it's important to make clear
I
that
always
in
thought that
Celtic and
fairies
other
were weak
European
to
cultures,
iron.
fairies are not believed to be physical material beings. They're thought to be magical spirit beings, far more ancient than humans, who possess the ability to manifest
Okay.
themselves in our physical realm
Fairies. I,
and
I, I
interact with
understand what a
everything human.
fairy is.
According to the legends,
I'm,
fairies
I'm
live
getting real
up
tired
this
of this
earth in a
AI art,
dimension
though.
parallel to our own, a place called
Couldn't you use,
Fairyland.
really cool, really
In his
sick,
1969
70s
book,
fantasy book
Passport
art?
to Magonia, Dr. Valet
Yeah,
described the
like that.
supposed nature of this place.
See?
Quote, "It is a remote country, an invisible island, some faraway place, a sort of parallel universe which coexists with our own. It is made visible and tangible only to select people, and the doors that lead through it are tangential points, known only to the fairies." End quote. Here, Valet mentions something important.
Okay, this is just me. I'm sorry, I'm being an asshole again. Is it me or does he looks like the Heaven's Gate guy, right? Remember the Heaven's Gate cult? He looks like that guy, and it's been bugging me
Known only to the
ever since
fairies.
then.
End quote. Here, Valet
He's been
mentions something
bugging me about
important.
that.
The fact that there are
That he
countless
looks like that,
folktales and even
and I couldn't
first-hand
put my
accounts across
mind on
Europe
it
and its
until
distant
now.
history, in which humans have been able to access fairyland.
Right?
But it's
Right.
never possible on their own accord. No human is able to enter fairyland without the involvement of a fairy. According to the folklore,
Okay.
this might be by means of a friendly invite, a fairy's desperate request, a reward for helping a fairy, a deal made with the fairy, or trickery performed either by the fairy or the human. But most often, the human might simply be abducted. This rather profound connection between fairies and UFOs is well known today, thanks to Valet becoming obsessed with it, and devoting many of his works to exploring one of the greatest mysteries in recorded history. Quote, "When the underlying archetypes are extracted, the saucer myth is seen to coincide to a remarkable degree with the fairy faith of Celtic countries, and the widespread belief among peoples concerning entities whose physical and psychological descriptions place them in the same category as present-day UFO nods." End quote. Unfortunately, this paradigm shift led Dr. Jacques Vallée to be ostracized from the UFO community for years. In his own words, he felt like he'd become a heretic among heretics. This dramatic change of mind
Heretic
was
Amongst
as
Heretics
uncomfortable
sounds
for
like a
others
really
as it
cool
was for
Doom
himself,
mod.
though, as he'd invested much of the decade
Sounds like a
prior
pretty cool
leading the
Doom
charge
mod, in
as
my
one of
humble
the
onion.
extraterrestrial hypothesis' biggest proponents. Like J. Allen Hynek and John Keel, Dr. Valet had spent years trying to validate it, but his studies repeatedly ended with evidence to the contrary. In 1969, Valet felt that he had no choice but to publicly renounce his support for the extraterrestrial hypothesis, reject it, and argue fiercely against it. The first conclusion he settled on was that the extraterrestrial hypothesis had a serious problem of ignoring data. That data appeared to show a statistical connection between UFOs, demonology, angelology,
Wait,
fairy
wait,
faith,
what?
occult beliefs, and psychic
Whoa,
phenomena.
whoa, roll that back
Vallée
there. I
also
want to make
reached a
sure I heard
related
you
second
correctly.
conclusion that UFOs are not physical, but was for himself though, as he'd invested much of the decade prior leading the charge as one of the extraterrestrial hypothesis's biggest proponents. Like J. Allen Hynek and John Keel, Dr. Vallée had spent years trying to validate it, but his studies repeatedly ended with evidence to the contrary. In 1969, Vallée felt that he had no choice but to publicly renounce his support for the extraterrestrial hypothesis, reject it, and argue fiercely against it. The first conclusion he settled on was that the extraterrestrial hypothesis had a serious problem of ignoring data. That data appeared to show a statistical connection between UFOs, demonology, angelology, fairy faith, occult beliefs, and psychic phenomena. Vallée also reached a related second conclusion that UFOs are not physical, but paranormal in nature, and are likely living beings as opposed to some sort of mechanical vehicle or controlled machinery. This mystery that UFOs are alive is one we'll be revisiting in significantly more depth later. These two conclusions led Dr. Vallée to a third, which was perhaps his most novel
Okay.
and influential contribution to what would soon form
Demon
the basis
aliens.
of
Dem
John Keel's
aliens.
ultraterrestrial hypothesis. Vallée proposed that what we think of as a UFO today, its appearance and behavior, and the appearance and behavior of its occupants, is a modern space-age manifestation of the exact same phenomenon we've been reckoning with for millennia. He argued that this was a continuous phenomenon of the same source and nature, but the phenomenon dons different disguises in different historical and social contexts. But these are still the same beings, and there are ways to tell. For example, most of us have heard of crop circles, the large geometrical patterns formed from flattened crops in a field, usually a cereal grain like wheat or barley. Often, crop circles are formed overnight. Now, we know that many of these are man-made, but others remain completely unexplained, especially those with multiple people claiming to have witnessed a UFO
Okay,
crater
I'm
before
done
nature.
taking the piss.
And at the end of the day, the crop circle
I'm done
phenomenon
taking the
has
piss.
never
That's not nice.
convincingly been debunked. They're most commonly found in Europe, with the heaviest concentration located in southern England.
Aren't dead mushroom
But
rings
whilst
called
older
fairy
stories of
rings, if I
crop
remember
circles only seem to
correctly?
date back to the 1900s, this is thought to be an entirely modern phenomenon. The question is that really true? A far older phenomenon was documented for at least 1,000 years across Britain and Ireland, this being the formation of so-called fairy rings.
Yeah, isn't that just due
These
to
are
dead
rings or other
mushrooms?
geometric patterns formed from sprouting mushrooms, or sometimes a ring of dark green grass or dead grass, or sometimes a combination. Fairy folklore warns that fairy rings are dangerous places
I like
that
this. This
couldn't
looks
be
like it'd be in a
disturbed
metal
or
album cover.
trespassed, and one must be wary of fairies who actively lure humans into fairy rings. Some
Why? What are
legends
they gonna do?
describe humans
Capture me
becoming
like a
psychologically
Pokemon and then
locked
summon me
inside
to
the fairy ring,
battle for their
driven to complete
amusement or something?
madness, or enchanted and fixated
I'm
with
being Johnny come
fascination,
shits and cereal now,
unable
aren't
to
I? I'm
escape the ring
sorry.
without outside intervention. That said, by far the most commonly recorded consequence of wandering into a fairy ring is that the person disappears. Either they're abducted by fairies and taken away to fairyland, or they're simply turned invisible and are never seen again. There are very
That's
obvious
frightening
connections
to just be
between folk
permanently
belief and
turned
fairies and the
invisible.
testimonies
That's
of
actually
UFO
kind of
witnesses
frightening,
and
being
those who
permanently
claim
turned
to have been
invisible. That's
abducted by
slightly
aliens.
frightening.
We're only scratching the surface here. What if crop circles and fairy rings might be two faces of the same phenomenon? What if the same beings have appeared to humans in differing forms, depending on context? What unnerved Vallée were the implications of this? That these beings carefully choose forms that will resonate with their specific human audience, to elicit a response that'll achieve whatever goal they want to accomplish. Thus, the only way we're able to identify these beings for what they are is through their patterns of behavior. Dr. Vallée warned his peers about this. Quote, Whether the creatures come down in flying saucers or musical baskets, whether they come out of the sea or the rock, is irrelevant. What is relevant is what they say and do, the trace that they leave in the human witness. This behavior presents us with a sample of situations and human reactions that trigger our interest, our
Now I'm
concern,
just
our
imagining the
laughter.
movie Sky on.
Edmonton's pancake story is cute. The tales of fairy food verge on the ludicrous. This
You
is
know
a
that. Oh,
facet
God,
of the
my brain is
phenomenon
farting.
taking the
Fire in the
form of a
sky.
myth. End quote.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
there's
yeah.
also
The
something
alien
very
abduction scene, but
specific
like
and
with cute,
profound.
whimsical
The
fairies.
possibility that absurdity might be a core feature of ultraterrestrial activity. If ultraterrestrials are far more intelligent than humans, it would make sense for them to know how we function, our instincts and drivers, all of which can be taken advantage of reliably because it's human nature. All humans rely on logic to navigate life. We want to live in a logical world that functions reliably and consistently,
Well,
according to the
sadly, the
same
universe ain't
fundamental
that way.
principles. Logic guides our decisions, answers our questions, and grounds us with order and predictability in a complex world. Because logic is so vital for our functioning and psychological well being, the human need for things to make sense is one of our most vulnerable and sensitive weak points, our Achilles heel. If reality stopped making sense, our cognitive frameworks would break down and thrust us into an existential crisis. Because we're so incredibly vulnerable to this, humans have natural defense mechanisms to deal with experiences and information that defy our expectations and beliefs.
Oh.
We cope by rationalizing, denying, dismissing, or mentally disassociating, and we'd sooner question our eyesight and sanity than question our reality. By
Well,
putting our
eyesight
logical
and
brain in the
sanity we can
details of
prove fail
situations that
us.
sound
That there's that.
unreasonable,
I'm being an
laughable,
asshole now. I'm being
inappropriate,
an
or
asshole, and I
irrelevant,
promised I wouldn't. I'm
Dr.
sorry.
Valet suspected that the ultraterrestrials could be using absurdity as their primary weapon and strategy against us.
For what reason?
Ironically, this makes a lot of logical sense when you think about it. As a weapon, absurdity attacks our rational brain by exhausting it. Our brain is not designed to process information or situations that defy logic, so the process of
Oh,
trying
hey,
to make sense of absurdity is
so
extremely
you saw that
challenging.
teaser trailer
When
for
we're
the He-Man
repeatedly
movie,
exposed to
right?
absurdity, our
I
brain
think
becomes
Duncan
stressed to the
looks
point at
pretty
which it
good, but
begins
everyone else
functionally
kind of
shutting
looks,
down.
well, kind
Among
of
other
bad.
problems, a fatigued rational brain
Like,
gradually
my
loses
main
its
problem
ability
with
to
that
process
Duncan outfit
information,
is how
think clearly,
desaturated it
concentrate,
looks. I'm not the
control
only one who
emotions, and
thinks
make
that,
good
right?
decisions.
It looks
Worse, it leaves us
desaturated to
wide
me, in
open
my
to
humblest of
deception and
onions.
manipulation because fatigue severely handicaps our brain's ability to judge credibility and trustworthiness and differentiate between true and false information. In the larger picture, though, using absurdity as a
It
core
does all look
strategy
mediocre.
could be a powerfully effective way of ensuring the long-term continuation of the ultra-terrestrials' covert operations on Earth.
What,
Absurdity causes confusion
what
and waste.
covert
So,
operations?
in the moment, they
Giving
might
people
question our
buckwheat
senses or sanity,
pancakes?
and in the long run, come to
That
doubt
doesn't
the
sound
validity
evil
and
to me.
accuracy of their memory.
You're just making the
On the other side,
ultra-terrestrials sound like friend
absurdity makes it
babies.
extremely difficult
You're
for
just making
anyone
them sound like
attempting to
friend
believe a
babies.
witness's
Here, giving
story,
me a buckwheat
assuming that
pancake
the
and a good
witness
hearty
doesn't simply
haha.
keep quiet about it. Claiming something absurd as true without extraordinary evidence can have serious personal and professional consequences, and there are other issues too. Absurdity is inherently misleading and distracting, which obscures any
It
elements
does
of
look
truth.
mediocre, I'm sorry if...
By definition, this is psychological warfare. In fact, humans have used absurdity in our own psychological operations for decades because of how well it works. So why wouldn't the ultra-terrestrials use it against humanity too? It's not absurd at all.
You're just
It's just
assuming that they have malevolence,
Dr.
though, is the
Jacques
problem,
Vallée
friend.
said that if we want evidence that these beings are targeting our rationality and logic, we will find the evidence of this truth by looking for the sameness in the strangest details. So, if you're ready, we're about to plunge off the deep end into the great airship mystery of 1896 and 1897.
Airship
Which
mystery, you
ranks
say?
as one of the strongest cases for an ultra-terrestrial conspiracy.
I'm
in
fascinated by this
action. This
airship
is real
mystery.
well-documented history, so let's
Never
put
heard about
Valé's
this, so I'm going to be
hypothesis
quiet
to
and
the
listen.
test.
Okay, the great airship mystery. Never heard about this. This could be fascinating,
Hot on the trail of
even
Dr.
if I
Ray's
don't,
findings,
you know,
in
think
1970, the journalist
ultra-terrestrials are
John
behind
Keel
it.
would bring to the table some of the most interesting and convincing evidence of ultra-terrestrials ever published. Given the absurdities involved, it's no surprise that these events have been historically overlooked and dismissed by the UFO community, though the memories of it remain immortalized across thousands of news reports. As Keel described in his book Operation Trojan Horse, quote, "The secret of flying saucers was exposed in 1896, not by the phenomenon itself, but by the hidden patterns now revealed in UFO activity of a single week that November. The pattern was a classic of carefully planned confusion and deception." End quote. In the years 1896 and 1897, a great airship mystery took place across the United States. It began in early November 1896 when a stranger visited the prominent San Francisco attorney George D. Collins
A stranger
in his office.
in Moscow.
Collins described the stranger as a man in his late 40s, standing around 5.5 feet tall, with a slender figure, dressed in dapper clothing, eyes large and dark, and his skin being of a dark complexion. The stranger spoke to the attorney in a manner that made it clear that he was of remarkably high intelligence. He explained to Collins that he'd invented a new type of airship that operated on compressed air and presented to him a number of detailed schematics. Finally, the stranger
Fucking
asked Collins
space
if he could
Italians.
represent him and help him obtain a patent. This was all very convincing, so Collins agreed. Several days later, during Thanksgiving week, multiple cities across Northern California surged with mass reports of luminous objects and cigar-shaped crafts in the sky. Sacramento residents described multicolored lights weaving in and out of frenzied patterns. And
I've always heard reports of like cigar-shaped UFOs or read about them, you know what I mean?
Approximately 150 feet long with
Always thought that was an interesting thing, a little detail of like older ufology stuff.
From beneath. While tens of thousands saw mystery airships in the sky, others claimed to have encountered them in person, on the ground. A San Jose electrician named J.A. Heron reported that he'd been contacted by the airship pilots to make repairs on the machine at a remote beach location north of San Francisco, and after completing the job, he wasn't paid in dollars, but in flight miles. Heron claimed that the inventor invited him on board and flew him on a 4,400-mile round trip to Honolulu, Hawaii, returning him home in less than 48 hours. Meanwhile, Freemason and legendary stagecoach driver William Bull Meek reported that the airship briefly landed in front of his house.
I'm sorry.
Meek was amazed to see the pilot hop out. He described him as a small man, darkly skinned and bearded. They enjoyed a pleasant chat together, and when Meek asked the pilot where he'd come from, the pilot answered that he'd come from the Montezuma Mountains, which is a real mountain range in Nevada. This frenzy swept all of Northern California with fascination, fear, and confusion. No one had any idea what was going on until the attorney George Collins contacted his local news reporters to provide an answer. He explained that the mystery airship that had been haunting the city's skies was none other than his client's invention being taken on a test run. But little did Collins know that his supposed client had paid a visit to an even more well-known San Francisco attorney, the previous Attorney General of California, William Henry Harrison Hart. On November 29th, Hart submitted a signed statement to the San Francisco Call newspaper. Quote, "I have not seen the
If nothing else, this could make for a good movie plot. I'm enthralled by it. I want to know what will happen more.
He has shown me drawings and diagrams of his invention.
Like this would make for a pretty good movie plot in my humblest of onions.
Than any other invention making such claims that I have ever seen.
This would make for a pretty decent movie plot in my humble onion.
To be the inventor, what his desires were in regard to carrying on the business, and he stated that he did not desire any money, that he didn't ask or want anyone to invest in it, that he was not a citizen of California, and that he had come here to perfect and test his airship. I will admit, this is the first time to my knowledge that anybody had anything in California in which he did not.
Okay, what does this have to do with
money?
Ultraterrestrials, though? This just sounds like a goofball.
Both Collins and Hart lost contact with their apparent
Or a
client,
strange
the
airship
inventor, who
sighting.
never actually revealed his real name to them. Based on the fact that the stranger had met with both attorneys prior to the mystery airship's first appearance, only one thing was clear. The stranger had prior knowledge of the spectacle to come, and thus the stranger and the mystery airships were connected. But if he really did invent the airship, why did he disappear? Why were the patents never filed? And why was the airship and its technology never released to the public? And no
Like I said,
evidence
this
of its
makes for a good
existence was
story
ever
nonetheless.
found.
I'll give it that much. I'm
What if this
fascinated and I'll have
self-proclaimed
to do
inventor
research on
was
my own
just a
time.
frontman for the operation? John Keel pointed toward the fact that the
That guy
stranger
looks like a
deliberately
Steve
chose
Buscemi
to
clone,
plant the
that
airship
AI
story
Steve
with
Buscemi clone.
George Collins and William Hart, two of the most well-known and respected attorneys in San Francisco. Seeing the chaos and confusion in their community,
AI
it would have been
Steve
expected
Buscemi
that
clone.
Collins and Hart would share what they knew with the public and offer what seemed to be a reasonable explanation. It didn't need to be perfect for the public to accept it. In fact, their answer didn't make sense, because the stranger told the attorneys that he'd only built one airship, yet witnesses saw multiple crafts appear at the same time in different places, and not a single one of these crafts resembled the airship diagrams that were shown to them. Keel argued that the stranger's goal from the very beginning was to take advantage of the two attorneys for their voice and reputation. If the stranger could convince Collins and Hart, they'd go on to convince the public. This is a psychological warfare tactic which John Keel explains in detail, making use of a 2,000-year-old example that's definitely controversial in this context, so heads up to my Christian viewers. Quote, "In hundreds of modern UFO events, we have repetitions of this tactic, which I call the press agent game. In these events, small, dark-skinned, dark-eyed gentlemen
Press agent.
appear in an area immediately before
The world's
or
most
immediately
bumbling
after
secret
a
agent.
flying saucer flop. Examples
His
of the
mission to
press
find
agent game can be found
ultraterrestrials.
in
He
the
hasn't found
religious and
any yet.
occult
I'm
lore,
sorry.
going back thousands of
I'm sorry, I'm
years.
gonna stop now.
Weeks before the birth of Christ, three dark-skinned men with oriental features arrived in King Herod's court. These were obviously men of wealth and breeding, just like our mystery inventor. The records say that they generated great excitement with the revelation that a very special child would soon be born somewhere in Judea. By making this appearance before King
It always
Herod
comes
and
back to
starting the
religion with
story,
these people.
they made
I'm
certain
sorry.
that the impending birth
I'm
would be
not. I'm
recorded
gonna
in the
pump the
court
brakes on my
records and
cartoonish
preserved for the
atheism.
ages. After
I'm gonna pump the
successfully
brakes
carrying
on
out
my
this mission,
cartoonish
the
atheism
trio from the
and
east
just
proceeded
not
to
say anything.
Bethlehem,
I'm sorry.
where they created another stir and focused attention on the Christ child.
I'm pumping the
Then,
brakes on my
instead of returning
cartoonish
to King
atheism.
Herod to
It's not
report,
funny. It's not
as they
cool.
had
It's not good.
promised, they went home by another way. Like our mystery inventor, they appeared in the area of action prior to the event. They visited the most important personage they could find. They circulated their story, and then they vanished. Our mystery UFO men usually travel in threes. According to the attorney William Hart, the 1896 inventor had 3 assistants with him, all of whom are mechanics. End quote. In the case of the Great Airship Mystery of 1896, it appears that the strategy worked. With no other airship spotted in the sky, and the self-proclaimed inventor gone with the wind, and Collins and Hart being the only ones to provide an explanation, despite its fundamental flaws, it was good enough for the public, at least until 1897. Things were quiet for several months, and just when everyone thought that the airship madness was over and done with, the mystery meter was about to dial up to an 11. In March of 1897, there was a mass sighting of a new mystery airship hovering above Omaha, Nebraska. Hundreds of people gathered and gazed up into the night sky. According to the reports, no one could quite make out the appearance of the craft itself, but they could see a fiery outline of a large dark object moving slowly in a straight line, spewing what looked like fireballs in many directions. A few days later, several thousand witnesses saw the same dark object fly directly over Chicago, Illinois. This time, they described a dark form surrounding a giant searchlight, which projected downward and blinded the ground as it passed. Circling it was an array of smaller multicolored lights that flashed erratically and darted around in a geometric pattern. On April 15th, Simultaneous reports of the mystery airship came in from Iowa, Illinois, Michigan, South Dakota, Texas, and Washington, D.C. Then on April 17th, the dark airship was seen hovering over Waterloo, Iowa, St. Louis, Missouri,
Oh, hey,
St.
I
John
live
Cross,
near there.
Michigan, and 12 towns in
I
Texas.
live near
A
St.
Michigan
Louis.
farmer named Bid Osborne gave this description of the craft to his local newspaper. Quote, I saw the airship last night at 10:30 p.m. over my barn.
Over my
About 200
barn.
feet long. Big brute row of Japanese lanterns all along top large wide sail like a fan-tailed dove.
Did I ever tell you
Birthday in
that the
color,
closest
and
thing
I
to a
heard voices
supernatural
from above.
experience I ever
End
had was
quote.
having deja vu
Whatever
in a
Bid
place that I
Osborne and the other
know
witnesses
100%
saw
I
in
was never been to
1897
before, and
sounds
that freaked me out
decades
for
and
like an hour
possibly
or so.
centuries more advanced
Because
than
that's like
any
the
known
closest I've
aviation
ever gotten.
technology of the time.
That's like the closest I've ever
According to
gotten.
the world-renowned
That
authority
made
on
me
the history
question
of
my sanity
aviation,
for like a
Charles
good few
Hubbard Gibbs
minutes, not
Smith,
gonna lie there.
the only airborne passenger vehicles that could have possibly been seen in North America in 1897 were free spherical balloons, which were small and unlikely to be mistaken for
I
anything
know
else.
that
You can be
that
certain
that
this
experience
wasn't
was
what
weird to
people
me,
saw.
man, nonetheless.
Similar to the events of the previous year, there were quite a few witnesses to landings, many of whom also reported bizarre interactions with the airship's crew. Their reports clearly describe some sort of powered, controllable, heavier-than-air flying machine. Before the Wright brothers invented the first airplane in 1903, powered
Right.
flight was generally believed by experts to be scientifically impossible. Obviously, the Wright brothers proved them wrong, but in 1897, this technology simply didn't exist. On April 22nd, 1897, in Trinity County, Texas, a farmer named Frank Nichols woke up near midnight to the sound of whirring machinery outside of his home. He took one look out the window and was startled at the sight of a massive, strangely shaped craft that had apparently landed in his cornfield and was beaming at him with powerful lights. Nichols headed outside to investigate and was met at his front door by two short men holding buckets, staring at him with
You're at the
large,
bucket.
dark eyes. Before the farmer could say a word,
Here's a
the
thought
men
that just
asked Nichols
occurred to
for
me, and
his
I'm being an
permission to
asshole
fill the
again.
buckets
Yes,
up at
yes.
his well.
Why would
The farmer
advanced
was
beings from
confused, but he
beyond this
told them to go
reality
ahead,
need us
and
for
as
water?
thanks, they invited him to go check out their ship. He was taken aboard by 8 other
What
individuals.
what
who
would
explained to him
hyperdimensional
that these
beings
ships
need
were a new invention
humans
that would be
like
launched to the
ordinary
general
just
public the
jack
following year.
jerk
They told him
offs
that
at
the
ordinary
airship was
assholes
constructed
for
in a small
water
town in
for
Iowa, and that the crafts
that's
were
what
powered
I
by
find the
condensed
most ridiculous
electricity.
about this premise,
Despite
this
asking the crew
idea
many
here.
questions, Nichols admitted to news reporters that the machinery inside the craft appeared so complicated that he had no understanding of it at all. The previous night, around 1 a.m. on April 21st, a retired Arkansas politician, referred to in the papers as ex-Senator Harris, was also woken up by a loud mechanical noise. And similarly, Harris could hardly believe his eyes when he peered out the window and saw the mystery airship descending onto his property. By the time he made it outside, the craft's occupants were already at his well, filling several buckets with fresh water. There were 2 young men, one elderly man and one woman. The elderly man had a long dark beard that hung down to his waist and jet black eyes that stared unnervingly into the eyes of ex-Senator Harris. While the other crew members remained silent,
I swear
the
I'm sick of
elderly
this
man
AI
began
art. I
talking
apologize.
excitedly and erratically to Harris about the craft and its invention, repeatedly referencing some story that he claimed had been published 26 years prior in the St. Louis Republic newspaper.
I don't think that
According to Harris,
I've never heard that
this is what
newspaper
the old man
before.
told him. Quote, in that paper, there was an account of a scientific invention made by a gentleman whose name I will not mention, by which the laws of gravitation were entirely and completely
Isn't me to this AI art human? He looks like a really bad action figure. I'm sorry. I know. I'm shitting on this. I'm being an asshole. But he looks like the AI artanoid, and I use that term loosely, looks like an action figure.
He was offered big sums of money for it by several syndicates in this country.
The AI
and also
annoyed.
had
There we go.
large
I
offers
got a
from
word out of
Paris,
there.
London, and many other places. During the time he was considering offers, he had the invention securely locked in a safety deposit vault in New York City. Before he had accepted any of the offers, he was taken violently ill. and after lingering a few weeks,
You remember
died,
that X
leaving
Files
his invention in
spinoff?
the vault.
What was it
This
called?
man was
Millennium?
my uncle, and he
I
had
remember
gratefully
watching that with my
confided the secret
stepdad
to me,
before it got
but not
canceled really
sufficiently
early
for me
on.
to
I don't
do
think it was all
anything
that
without the
good if
original
memory
invention.
reminds me all that
After the
much.
lapse of about 19
I really
years,
should
I managed to
rewatch all of
secure
the
the
X
original,
Files,
and
though.
having
That's
plenty
another
of money at
list
my
of items that
disposal,
I need to do
and
on my
having
list of
devoted my
things.
time and talent during the past
I'm
7 years
sorry.
to
I
experimenting,
come off as
I
an
have an
asshole
airship
again.
which is almost perfection, but I am not quite through experimenting, and so I continue to travel at night to keep from being detected. I will make an attempt to visit the planet Mars before I put the airship on public exhibition. Weight is no object to me. I suspend all gravitation by placing a small wire around an object. You see, I have a 4-ton improved Hotchkiss gun on board, besides about 10 tons of ammunition. I was making preparations to go over Cuba and kill off the Spanish army if hostilities had not ceased. But now my plans are changed, and I may go to the aid of the Armenians. To use this improved gun, we only have to pour the cartridges into a hopper, press a button, and it fires 63,000 times per minute. No, gravitation is not in my way. I place my wire around this 4-ton gun and hold it in one hand and take aim. Oh, I could place my anti-gravitation wire around the National Capitol building and take it by the dome and bring it and set it down in Harrisburg as easy as I could in Inkstand. Distances almost overcome. Why, we came over the suburbs of Dallas at 12:10, less than an hour ago, and we have traveled very slowly. I could take breakfast here, do my shopping in Paris, and be back here for dinner without inconvenience, as soon as I get my new propellers completed. End quote. As scattered, manic, and improbable as the old man's claims sound, strangely enough, his words echo other interactions reported by several other witnesses who claim to have met and spoken with the airship pilot, who they also described as an old, bearded man with jet black eyes and sometimes wearing spectacles. In Harris's case, these are the Cuban War of Independence and the Armenian genocide. Another commonality was the claim that the airship was a secret invention that would soon be made public. Also, farmer Frank Nichols and ex-Senator Harris weren't the only contactees to describe the airship filling up on fresh water or otherwise restocking their supplies. This harks back to the story of the chicken farmer Joe Simonton filling up the jug for the Italian-looking aliens, but maybe there's a reason for all this water collecting, and we'll revisit this with some potential answers a little bit later. Moving on, there were also a number of reports of strange auditory phenomena accompanying sightings of the ship and contact events with its crew. Most commonly, people heard voices from the sky. A man named William McGivern from Pine Lake, Michigan, reported that on the night of April 17th, a light blared into his bedroom, blinding him. He stepped outside, and as the newspaper described, quote, William McGivern was accosted by a voice from above, which told him that the light was from the airship, that during the afternoon the ship had been lying concealed behind a bank of clouds over the lake, and that a stray shot from the gun of some duck hunters had injured one of the ship's wings, and they were laying by for repairs. William then says that he was directed to prepare 4 dozen egg sandwiches and a kettle of coffee for the crew, and when prepared, the provender was hoisted on board
I'm gonna say
with a
this.
scoop
Beyond
fully as
Creepy, I
large as a
think, does a
freight
better
car,
job,
and
and
paid
I think
for
it
in
might be because
Canadian
of the
quarters.
music they use.
Then the ship sailed off toward the city.
Or maybe
The
it's just I
Lord's
find
machinery
Beyond
was
Creepy a
plainly
little
discernible for
more.
several
The
moments.
videos I've
End
seen of
quote.
them more interesting.
A
I'm sorry.
particularly weird report of auditory phenomena combined with a contact event was published in the Daily Chronicle of Muskegon, Michigan on April 30th. Quote, Last night at 11:30, this town received a visit from the wonderful airship. It came from the north and descended till it was about 200 feet from the ground, directly over the bridge. It was lighted with electricity and loaded with revelers who were making a good deal of noise. The music was entrancing, the like of which never was heard in this place. It wasn't
Okay.
long before everybody was on the street to look and listen, many in their nightclothes. Not a few thought that Judgment Day had come. It was about 300 feet long, tail about 40 feet, its breadth and depth about 90 feet. It stayed 55 minutes. Its tail commenced whirling
I
and it
got
moved
nothing.
toward Fremont, but just as it began to move, A grappling hook was let down and
Ah,
caught one of the
Batman, the
most
caped
truthful
crusader, is
citizens,
behind
who was
all of it.
instantly
I'm gonna
hoisted
stop.
on
I'm gonna
board
stop
and
being an
carried
asshole.
away.
I'm sorry.
The truthful citizen came back on the 11:30 train from White Cloud and has been talking ever since about aerial navigation. End quote. The grappling hook is another one of those ridiculous details that seems straight out of a fantasy movie.
It really
Just
does. I'm
a
sorry.
mystery airship pulling up random people as part of its spectacle. But on March 26, 15 miles north of Sioux City, Iowa, one of the earliest mentions of the airship's hooks was recorded. Only this time, the ship was not offering a tour of the skies, but seemed intent on kidnapping a farmer named Robert Hibbard. During the night, Hibbard was walking on his farmland when he saw a dark form with beaming lights headed toward him. He stared at it until it was directly above his head. Suddenly, the craft made a sharp turn and descended rapidly toward him. According to the report, quote, Hibbard did not notice a drag rope with a grapnel attached which dangled from the rear of the car until suddenly, as the machine rose up again from the ground, it hooked itself firmly in his trousers and shot away again to the south. Had it risen to any considerable height, the result, Hibbard thinks, would have been disastrous. On the bank of the dry run, where the farmer finally met his escape, grows a small sapling. Hibbard passed near this obstruction in his flight, and as a last resort, grabbed it with both hands. Instantly, there was a sound of tearing cloth, and the machine went on with a
I'm gonna
section
ask.
of
This is
Hibbard's
just. This
unmentionable,
is not an
while Hibbard
asshole
himself fell
question.
precipitably into the run. End quote.
What do you
There
think
was a third
of
incident
other
months after
dimensions,
Hibbard's
other thing,
encounter
like
that
other
recorded a similar
extra
broken hook being
dimensionals
thrown
beyond our
off of a ship,
reality? Because that is a
though this
fascinating
time its
concept, and I
function
know
appeared to be that of an anchor,
there's been
and Hibbard was also
mathematical
apparently
work to try to
accompanied by a
prove
sailor.
other
The event
dimensions
occurred on
beyond the
April
physical ones that
26
we
in Mercer,
understand.
Texas. Quote, some parties returning
And
from church last night
I
noticed a heavy
read very
object
little
dragging along with a
that I could
rope
understand
attached.
because the math
They
is
followed
just
it until in crossing the railroad,
I
it
don't have
caught on
a
a rail.
an
On
understanding
looking
of the
up, they saw what
mathematics
they
beyond it,
supposed was the
but I
airship.
always found the
A light
concept
could
to
be
be
seen protruding
fascinating
from several
nonetheless. It's
windows,
just
one bright light in front.
the
After
math.
some 10 minutes,
Just
a
I
man
can't
was seen
understand it.
descending below.
It's basically
He
writing in
came
a
near
foreign
enough to be
language. I
plainly
have no
seen.
idea what it's
He
saying.
wore a light blue sailor suit and was
And
small in
that's
size. He
something
stopped
I've
when
always
he
found
discovered
like
puddles at the
fascinating as
anchor
a
and
concept
cut the
of
rope below him and
parallel
sailed off in a
realities or
northeast
alternate
direction. End quote.
dimensions beyond the physical three that we
Reportedly,
can
the
kind
anchor
of
was then placed
understand.
on exhibition at the blacksmith
That's
shop of
something I
Elliot
found
and Miller,
fascinating.
drawing the attention of
But
hundreds
more
of
is like a
viewers.
science fiction
So
concept
again, we're
because the
met with strong
mathematics that talk
elements
about
of
it are just
absurdity. A
so
small
beyond
man in
me.
a
I've
stereotypical blue
heard
sailor
people
suit
say that
climbing down a
some
rope in the
people
sky to
can
cut off his airship
mathematically
anchor that would
quantify up to
accidentally
12. I
become
don't know if that's
hooked.
true or not. I may have read that
So,
somewhere
why
and
is there an account of the same thing
I
in
may
the
be
Olia
incorrect. I'm
Imperialia,
sorry.
an obscure encyclopedic work written in Europe by Gervase of Tilbury in the 13th century? Gervase recounts.
One moment. BRB. Okay, I swear I'm not making this up. Hand to God. The reason why I have to take a BRB is because one of the tubs that I keep shit in while watching this fell down on me. And now I gotta go put it back. I swear this happened. I swear to God this happened. I'm not making a joke. I'm not making a jape. This is not a lie. So I will be right back again because apparently I have to go pick that up. I swear, hand of God, this happened. I'm back. I'm just gonna have to fix that on stream later. I'm gonna have to fix the tub. It keeps falling over. I swear to you. I swear to you. This is not a joke.
Set during a feast
My
day
heart.
around
Oh god.
1200 AD in Bristol, England. A rope and anchor plunged down from the clouds. It landed on the ground and dragged until it became caught on a mound of stones. A large crowd of churchgoers gathered and watched in awe as a sailor shimmied down the rope to try to free the anchor. According to the text, quote, when the sailor was about to disengage the anchor, he was seized by bystanders. He gasped in the hands of his captors like a man lost in a shipwreck, and died suffocated in the moisture of our thicker air. But the sailors overhead, surmising that their comrade had drowned, cut the anchor rope after having waited an hour and sailed away, leaving the anchor. End quote. According to the text, the giant anchor was later installed as fittings for the door of the church where the incident took place. There are nearly identical stories going back centuries before this. If you look up the airship of Clonmacnoise online, you'll find a trove of these historical anecdotes in medieval Irish, Scottish, and Old Norse sources. In some of these accounts, the sailor survives, either escaping on his own or through the mercy of the local bishop, who commands his people to let him go. The oldest records of such an occurrence are found in several sets of Irish annals, the year-by-year historical records of Ireland, which date it back to 743, 744, 748, and 749 AD. It's unknown whether these all describe the same event or similar but separate occasions. Either way, the sailor and his anomalous anchor dropping from the sky were treated in all counts as remarkable and very real occurrences in history. An airship dropping anchor might make sense in 1897. Early airships, also known as dirigibles or zeppelins, were
This just happens
aircraft
whenever I
down
extend
to
myself.
float in the air. These airships
Fucking cock! It fell again.
sky anchors to slow the airship
I can't.
down and keep it in place.
My heart.
However, the
My heart's going to implode if I do that again right now. So it's just gonna be on the fucking ground for now.
Was launched in 1783, so it's unknown what was being described in these medieval records. If these were UFOs constructed and operated by an advanced civilization, it seems unlikely that they'd even need anchors. Something doesn't add up, and obviously all these cases sound completely ridiculous until you put them together. We need to return to the year 1897, because the airship mystery is not yet over. Here's where the more suspicious problems began to pile on. On April 15th, the mystery airship was seen above Appleton, Wisconsin. The following day, a farmer named N.B. Clark came across an 18-inch iron rod lodged into the ground of his property, with an unsigned letter attached to it. The letter read, quote, aboard the airship Pegasus, April 9th, 1897. The problem of aerial navigation has been solved. The riders have spent the past month cruising about in the airship Pegasus and have demonstrated to their entire satisfaction that the ship is a thorough success. We have been able to attain a speed of 150 miles an hour and have risen to a height of 2,500 feet above sea level. The Pegasus was erected at a secluded point 10 miles from Lafayette, Tennessee, and the various parts of the machine were carried overland from Glasgow, Kentucky to that point, being shipped from Chicago, Pittsburgh, and St. Louis. We have made regular trips of 3 days each from Lafayette to Yukon, and no harm has come to the Pegasus thus far. Within a month, our application for the patents for a parallel plane airship will be filed simultaneously at Washington and the European capitals. The ship is propelled by steam and is lighted by electricity, and has a carrying power of 1,000 pounds.
1,000 pounds, you say?
2 days later, on April 17th,
I'm finally able to breathe again.
spotted a brown paper package high up in a tree in Chicago's
I'm
Lincoln
finally able
Park.
to breathe again.
They climbed up, brought it
Without
down, and
hyperventilating.
unwrapped it, revealing a lunchbox.
I need to figure out what's wrong with my
Inside was a
heart,
half-eaten
where
lunch,
even
and
the smallest
attached to
little
the lunchbox
tasks
was an
will
expensive engraved card
make
with
it
a
just go
gilded
hyper
image
speed,
of a boy standing
and I
on
don't know
top of
why.
outstretched wings, with the words airship in gold. The inside of the card contained a handwritten message in blue pencil. Quote, drop from the airship Saratoga, Friday.
Okay, we're stopping for the night. I gotta go clean up this bucket. I will be right back. I'm gonna go pick up this bucket one more fucking time, and then I'm calling it a night. The extraterrestrials, the ultraterrestrials win for now. Goodbye for BRB. Good night, JoJo's. We will come back to this next Wednesday. I gotta go take care of that bucket. It keeps falling down. The ultraterrestrials, they've won for now. I gotta go clean up my room. I'll be back. That's it. Goodbye for now. We will continue this tomorrow, next week, whatever. Goodbye, JoJo's. Goodbye. Goodbye. Good